Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about how do you know when you need an alignment. I'm going to go over some of the indicators that your vehicle might be giving you. I'm also going to go over the basics of the alignment itself. One indication that you might need an alignment is the steering wheel. Is it straight as you're driving down a straight road? If it's slightly off, like mine here is slightly off to the left, that's a pretty good indication that you probably need an alignment. Another thing to check for is, does the car drift to one side or the other? If it pulls to one side, if you're constantly having to steer in one direction to keep it going straight down the road, that's a pretty good indicator that an alignment might be required. So the alignment, as the word implies, is the relationship between the wheels and the suspension geometry on the vehicle. And there are three main angles that we concern ourselves with when dealing with alignment. The first alignment angle I want to talk about is caster. And I think of caster as the shopping cart wheel angle, because the way the shopping cart wheel is set up is it's always going to move in a direction and maintain that direction because of the way it's angled. So I often refer to caster as the shopping cart wheel angle. Also, those wheels are called casters, so that might be a good way to remember it. But caster, as it pertains to the vehicle, is the backward or forward tilt of the suspension in relation to this center line. Think of the alignment of the upper and lower ball joints. There's the upper ball joint. I'm going to line the ruler up with that, and I'll line the lower part up with the lower ball joint. And as you can see, it's tilted slightly back. It's usually made to be a positive caster, which anything that's tilted back like this is considered positive caster. Anything that's tilted forward like this is considered negative caster. But most vehicles are set up with about 3 to 5 degrees of positive caster. And the reason you want this is to maintain straight line stability and also steering wheel returnability. The more positive caster you get, the more your steering wheel returns to center after you've completed a turn and the vehicle returns to a straight line. The thing of it is, it also, the further back you go, the more road feedback you get. So you might get a little more knock in the steering wheel as you're going over bumps and that type of thing if you have a lot of positive caster. But it will, like I say, cause the steering wheel to go back to center. It's rare that you see anything with negative caster. That sort of decreases stability. A couple of things about the caster angle. First of all, it is not a tire wearing angle. So if your caster is off, it's not going to cause abnormal wear to your tires. However, if you have a difference in caster between one side to the other, it can cause a pull in the direction of the side with the least amount of caster. So if I have, say, 5 degrees of positive caster on this side and I have 3 degrees on the passenger side, it's going to pull towards the passenger side. This might be a good thing if you do it in small degrees. The road that you drive on actually is not completely flat. It's pitched in the middle, and the reason they do that is for drainage, so that water and things can run off of the road. So as you're driving down the road, if things were set up to where caster was the same on both sides, the vehicle might tend to drift towards the ditch a little bit. So in order to compensate for that, what is sometimes done is a little bit of negative caster on the driver's side of the vehicle. And the reason they do that is to compensate for that road crown. So you have just a little bit of a pull in the direction of that road crown will keep you going straight down the road. And as I said, it's not a tire wearing angle, so it's not going to cause your tires to wear strangely, but if your vehicle often drifts towards the ditch, it may be because your caster is the same on both sides. But if the caster is unequal and unequal enough, it will cause the vehicle to pull toward the side with the least amount of caster. One more thing to note about the caster angle is that it may not always be adjustable on your vehicle. The next alignment angle I'd like to discuss is camber. And camber is the inward or outward tilt of the wheel in relationship to this center line. And with this accurate up in the air, what you'll see is that I've gone positive camber. So the wheels and the suspension are totally relaxed, and you notice that the top of the wheel is out further than the bottom of the wheel. As it rests on the ground, it gets closer to zero camber. As you make a corner, one side is going to go negative camber. It's kind of like putting your hands out to support yourself if you're falling over. And that's negative camber. You'll notice vehicles that are lowered extremely so, you'll see that the wheels are tilted in an extreme angle. That's extreme negative camber. Camber angle can affect handling. In fact, if you have too much positive camber, it's very unstable. It becomes more stable as you go negative, but it can cause tire wear problems. And both the front and the rear wheels will have some amount of camber, not always adjustable on the rear, not always adjustable on the front, but it's something to be aware of. Now let's talk about the third and final alignment angle, which is the most critical when it comes to tire wear, and that is toe. Toe is the inward or outward tilt of the wheel in relationship to the suspension. So if your front wheels are pointed in like this, it's called toe in. If they're pointed out like this, it's called toe out. The reason I say this angle is so important is because as you drive down the road, if you have toe that's out on one side, either inward or outward, instead of that tire traveling straight down the road, if it was pointed straight, it will still travel straight down the road, but it will cause what's called scrubbing. So one or both wheels could be pointed at such an angle to where it's not allowing the tires to contact the road properly, and they're scrubbing as they're moving along. Toe is the most critical angle when it comes to tire wear, and it's very important, especially if you do work on, say, tie rods or power steering racks or anything like that, that you have the toe checked when you're done. If not, it could really hurt your tires. Now that we've talked about the three major angles of an alignment, let's talk about the things that need to be done in preparation before you do an alignment. Now, one of the main things is there can be no play whatsoever in the suspension. So if there's any movement side to side or top to bottom on any of the wheels, the vehicle is not alignable. These angles are very closely measured, so any play within the suspension is going to throw off the entire process. So if you've got any loose suspension parts whatsoever, an alignment cannot be done until you complete those repairs. Once you know that your suspension is solid and doesn't have any play in it, the next thing to turn your attention to is the tire pressures. Somewhere on your vehicle there's a sticker that says what type of tires, what size tire, and what pressure to set those tires at, both front and back. Those tires need to be set to that pressure before you do the alignment. Another thing to be taken into consideration is ride height. Now, somewhere there's a specification that says where to measure the ride height of the vehicle, but from side to side you want to make sure that it's relatively even. If it's not, the ride height of the vehicle will affect the alignment. As long as we're on the subject of the driver, ride height, and weight, I think it's worth noting that if you are a large person and you've had trouble getting a proper alignment in the past, something I would suggest is that you actually sit in the driver's seat of the vehicle as the alignment is being done. This will help ensure that the alignment is done with the weight of you in the vehicle, and that may be the best alignment you ever get. Some vehicle manufacturers actually require ballast be placed on the driver's seat, and sometimes a full tank of gas, and a bunch of other stipulations that need to be followed in order to set the suspension geometry correctly. So now that we've covered a lot of the basics of the alignment, let's talk about some of the repairs that you might do to your vehicle that afterward you should consider getting an alignment done. Now, as you can see, I've done quite a bit of work to the front suspension on my Vigor recently. I've replaced the axle, I've replaced the outer tie rod ends, I've replaced the struts and the upper control arms. So I've done a lot of work to correct a lot of that looseness that we talked about. One of the most commonly asked questions I get is, Eric, I just replaced my front struts. Do I need to get an alignment? And the answer to that is maybe. Now, the struts that I have here are fastened down in this location, and there's nothing here that affects any kind of alignment angle. However, if you replace coil springs, that affects ride height. Ride height does affect alignment. So it's a good idea if you put in quick struts, let's say, that have new coil springs to get an alignment done. However, if you're just doing struts like this and you're reusing the old coil springs and you don't see what's called a cam bolt fastening the strut to the knuckle here, then you're probably good not getting an alignment. If you're nervous about it, err on the side of caution and get an alignment. I'll show you what a cam bolt here is in just a second. In the back on the Vigor here is a cam bolt. You'll see how it's got this washer that's kind of offset. It's fatter on one side than it is on the other. As you rotate it, it changes the effective length of this control arm. If you find these on struts or if you find these anywhere on anything that you work on, after you complete the work, you're going to have to get an alignment. If they're just regular bolts like this, you're probably not going to have to worry about it. Question: should you get a two-wheel alignment or a four-wheel alignment? The answer: four-wheel alignment. The reason I say this is if the rear wheels are off, you can't adjust the front wheels properly. So if there is an adjustment in the rear wheels, if anything, it needs to be checked before you deal with the front wheels. Even if all you did was work up front, you still need to know what the back is doing. In this case, as I talked about just a moment ago, I have the cam bolts. Now these are old and rusty and frozen up, and you may find on a car that's old like this that alignment cannot be done until suspension parts are replaced. So I've got my fingers crossed that when I do the alignment on this vehicle, that the back is close enough to where it's not going to cause any kind of tire wearing issues. As long as we're back here, I want to point something out. You see this brace that goes in between and basically holds some of the rear suspension components together here. I've had people, come into the shop that had problems with alignment in the rear of their vehicles because somebody came in and lifted the vehicle or put a jack underneath here and lifted up and bent this part. If you bend this, this can actually cause these control arms to move and be adjusted just as if you turned a cam bolt like on the other control arms. So be very careful where you place a floor jack when you're working on your vehicle, because if you bend something like this, it can affect the alignment adversely. Okay, let's sum it up. When are the times when you're going to need an alignment? Well, as I spoke about earlier, if you're driving down the road and the vehicle pulls to one side or the other, that's a pretty good indication that you need an alignment. If you're driving down a straight road and your steering wheel is off and not quite straight, a good indication that you need an alignment. If you have abnormal tire wear, just take your hand and rub it along the top there. If you notice anything abnormal, that's a good indication that there's an alignment issue. Now, if you get an alignment on old worn tires, it's not going to be the same as if you get an alignment on new tires. There's never a better time to align your vehicle than when you get new tires. In fact, it's the best insurance you can give your new investment in tires is to get an alignment along with that. In fact, many stores that install tires often have an alignment to go with those tires. It's extremely important. Those two things go together hand in hand. When should you get your alignment checked? That's rather subjective. Some people recommend an annual alignment inspection. If you live in an area with a lot of potholes, things like that, those are things that can possibly cause the suspension to go out of whack a little bit. Maybe you hit curves, maybe you do those kind of things. If you find yourself in that position, probably not a bad idea to get it checked once a year. Should you do a two-wheel or a four-wheel alignment? I always recommend a four-wheel alignment. You have to know what the back end is doing in order to properly align the front. If the vehicle has been in a collision, something could be bent that you can't necessarily see with the naked eye, yet when you get it up on the alignment rack, you may have a better idea of what might be bent or broken in those instances that, like I say, you can't necessarily see. Also, if you're a larger person, you may consider sitting in the driver's seat of the vehicle while they perform the alignment. The reason for this is because the ride height will change, particularly with larger people. There's no better time to have you in the driver's seat and set everything up for you. Now, as I stated, some manufacturers actually advocate putting a certain amount of ballast in the vehicle, a certain amount of weight in different locations, filling up the gas tank. They have a whole list on some vehicles of the things that you need to do in order to properly align it. You'll have to consult with your service manual for the vehicle that you're working on to know if that's going to be the case. However, just know that that may be the possibility, and that may make some alignments more expensive than others. Now, a lot of people come to me and they say, my vehicle has a vibration, I'm going to go get an alignment. That's a common misconception I'm finding, and that people think that the alignment can cause a vibration. An alignment cannot cause a vibration. It's things like tires being out of balance or perhaps a bad axle or some rotating assembly is normally what's going to cause a vibration, not the angles of the suspension. The things that the alignment affect are basically your tire wear and how the vehicle handles. Also, you need to make sure that all of your suspension parts are tight and there is no play in them whatsoever in order to properly align the vehicle. When you're doing alignments, there's a zero tolerance for any suspension play. So if you have any suspension play in any of the wheels, address that play in the suspension before you get the alignment. Well, I just got the alignment done and it's tracking down the road straight, steering wheel straight. I know my tires aren't gonna get all wonky because of poor alignment. So I'm good to go for a while. And I guess that about wraps it up. I'll put links in the description with additional information, so if you have questions, you can go there. If you have automotive questions not covered in this video, I'd ask that you head over to ericthecarguy.com. There's a welcome video there to tell you about the features we have to help you with those automotive issues. If you wish to connect with me socially, I have Google+, Facebook, Twitter, also Instagram that you can find me on. I post repair videos every Friday, so stop back and see me then. I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, and stay dirty. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.